And we are now live.
Thank you. This is continuation of testimony on the budget adjustment, and we have Julie Moore, Secretary of A&R, and Emily Byrne, the business manager or CFO, or I don't know exact title, Emily, and who are here to present the budget adjustment request for the agency. So thank you, Secretary Moore. And are there, do you want to screen share, or how do you want to do this?
Yes, I have just a handful of slides. I did send them to Chrissy, but if I can share my screen, that would probably be easiest.
Okay. Just as like Senator Westman's been assigned co-chair.
I believe you should be able to see my screen now. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay. So there are two, sort of maybe three, depending on how you want to count budget adjustment requests that I'm going to speak to here. The first is around our clean water funding and recommendations from the Clean Water Board. And that particular set of moves involves both some ARPA related funds as well as some changes in the Clean Water Fund. I'm going to walk you through them, but then we'll have Emily talk about exactly how you can sort of follow along in the budget tables with the changes I'm providing an overview of. And then I'm going to also address the request related to Green River Reservoir. So just starting at a high level, the ongoing ARPA funded water infrastructure initiatives in the FY22 budget totaled $50 million. 40 million of it was directed to 6 A&R led initiatives that I have listed here. Would flag for you all that there are some language changes included in the BAA related to the Healthy Homes Initiative, specifically making clear that we are able to provide grants in addition to loans and are able to address not only failed drinking water and wastewater systems, but inadequate systems. Dam safety was also one of those initial ARPA funded initiatives, but was since moved to general fund due to some eligibility concerns. In addition, the General Assembly provided a total of $30 million, but $10 million in FY22 for allocation by the Clean Water Board, as well as $30 million in the 22 budget to continue and expand that list of 6 initiatives I just walked you through. Just as an aside, as at the end of last calendar year, we had deployed about 2/3 of those FY22 ARPA appropriations and expect to have all of the FY22 ARPA water infrastructure money committed by the first quarter of this calendar year.
So Julie, I have a question. The Treasury just issued a ruling and it's broadened the eligible water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. This would be probably for the money that went to municipalities or towns. And so money's going here, and I know that water projects, the cost is certainly, some of them are pretty high. My question is, has there been any experience of towns saying, coming to you and saying, can we get X amount of funding for a project and we can fund X amount, so that there's kind of blending or braiding of the two different funding streams for that local infrastructure?
Yes, so maybe I'll flip back just so we're looking at the list of initiatives. I think the scenario you're describing, Senator Kitchell, probably touches village water and sewer grants in particular, some of the sewer overflow work, and then this pre-treatment initiative in particular, which we believe needs to have a municipal partnership. The pre-treatment initiative we're still developing. We had done a request for information to make sure we understood sort of the lay of the land. And so I don't have great answers in that space, but in terms of sewer overflow and village water and sewer, we haven't required municipalities to use their ARPA dollars in order to access the state ARPA funds. That said, each of these initiatives has been designed so that the recipients do need to have some financial contribution to the program. And I anticipate communities may choose to use their ARPA dollars to meet the sort of their cost share in each of these initiatives. The guidance that came out last week from Treasury did provide pretty broad discretion to what will be most Vermont municipalities, any that received, I think, less than $10 million in ARPA funds, to sort of use it as, assume it's replacing lost revenue, which then gives them broad ability to deploy those dollars. I think the timing is good just in terms of communities having money to provide the match to some of these programs. And the demand and interest we've seen in them, I think, has sort of surprised folks at the agency. We knew there would be interest, but it's been broader than we anticipated. And it may be those local ARPA dollars that are helping people see a path to funding some of this work.
I was wondering about the timing since it's coming in so late, and the league and the RPCs have been working with towns for months, since July, whether they had already kind of put together their plans around how they would use the funds, and whether it would mean some revisions or whatever. But it seems like when we're talking about long-term benefit and infrastructure improvement, we had different buckets of money. Some were much more directed, like the first 40, and then the other was the 30 million overall for allocation by the Clean Water Board.
Correct. And the league has been very consistent in their messaging to towns about the benefits of sort of taking their time and being thoughtful about how they deploy these dollars. We've done a series of webinars co-hosted with the league to provide that kind of background information just about the programs we will be funding, so that communities can have a sense for what the opportunities are going to be within the A&R space versus opportunities they may want to pursue on their own. And also kind of the constraints around some of our initiatives. We are trying to hew to not just the federal guidance around our state revolving fund, which is how we generally provide loans for water and wastewater improvements, but also hew to the additional requirements that have been established in state statute. Municipalities don't have to adhere to those second set of requirements, so they actually have probably some additional flexibility beyond what the agency has, even in the water and sewer category and the sewer overflow category.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Let's see. So I will then sort of get into the details of what's going on in the clean water space specifically. And this involves a couple of different moves. So the Clean Water Board looked at the $10 million that was made available in ARPA funds and sort of used a handful of guiding principles in deciding where to direct it. Obviously, first and foremost, the screen it passed through was projects that are ARPA eligible. And we received some valuable input from Doug Farnham about the types of investments that could be made. And then the other piece the board looked at was trying to sort of centralize, for lack of a better word, those ARPA investments into just a handful of the line items within the clean water budget to help with some of the management and administration concerns. And ultimately, the Clean Water Board recommended, and this is in the FY22 budget, $3.5 million of ARPA funding being directed to agricultural best management practices, $3.5 million directed to stormwater project delivery, planning and implementation, and $3 million to municipal pollution control grants, which are the match opportunities the state offers to communities who are investing in upgrades to their wastewater facilities. As a result of those recommendations, the Clean Water Board then recommended reprogramming $3.5 million that had been of clean water fund monies that had been set aside in the 22 budget for stormwater project delivery and planning and implementation to places where we were seeing increased need or demand. And that included municipal road stormwater mitigation and moving $1.5 million to be administered by V-Trans in that space. Natural resources restoration projects. Some are being led by the Department of Fish and Wildlife, some by DEC, and then increasing our partner support grants. In addition, the Clean Water Fund actually well outperformed expectations. We had some fairly conservative assumptions, particularly because such a significant portion of the Clean Water Fund derives from the rooms and meals tax. And we were well ahead of schedule. And so we're also recommended the increased allocation of funds to the Ag Agency of just north of $1.4 million. As a reflection that farmers were seeing some real contractor price volatility. Projects that had been out to bid in 2020 or in 2019, those prices were no longer being honored. And it was affecting the ability of the Ag Agency to meet cost share targets and helping farmers advance water quality projects. And then finally, one additional component of our BAA request related to clean water is to complete the transfer of the grant and aid program to VTrans. We closed out all of our FY20 grants. There ended up being about $675,000 on the bottom line of that particular initiative. Both some money that was returned from projects that came in under budget, and also some money that was returned for projects that couldn't be completed as a result of COVID. And we want to complete the transfer of those funds from ANR over to VTrans, where they will continue in perpetuity to administer the grant and aid program. I can pause there and answer questions, but also would encourage Emily to jump in and correct the record if I've misspoken.
So when I want to go back, when we appropriated in the G section, we had funding, and then we had the 10 million that to be recommended. So now we have the specific allocation of that 10 million. Okay. So Stephanie, do we have to, since the money's been appropriated, is this going to show in the BAA?
I can jump in, Senator Kitchell. There's language in the governor's proposed budget adjustment act that amends that $10 million language to say, $10 million to the Clean Water Board, 3.5 to Agency of Agriculture,
Okay.
6.5 to DEC.
So it's being done in the language section. Okay. All right.
Yep.
Because the money had already been, except, well, the allocation of clean water. We know rooms and meals performed very well. Did that increase revenue? Is it greater than 1.4, or did all the overage get allocated to the Agency of Ag?
So that $1.4 million reflects the figure that was available to us, I think, as of the end of March, and would again ask Emily to correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't reflect the full sort of amount that the actuals exceeded the projected in FY22. There is a small amount of additional money that remains on the bottom line.
Okay.
And we know that in FY23, in FY22, I should have said 21. In FY22, we are also tracking well ahead of projections at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
What does AAFM stand for?
Agency of
Agriculture and Food Market.
Agency of.
Oh, okay.
All right. We need to scroll down if we get, because we can't see below the grant and aid going to VTrans.
Oh, that's the last line on this slide. And then my next one is about the Green River Reservoir request.
Oh, all right.
I think the only thing I would add to Secretary Moore's testimony, it is a little funky because some of these pieces are in the numbers section. So you see them on the spreadsheet. So the agriculture appropriation, the reallocation of the Clean Water Fund, the $3.5 million of Clean Water Fund. So what's going to Fish and Wildlife, DEC, and VTrans shows up there. But then the ARPA appropriations are in the language. And then the reversion, there's a reversion and then an appropriation of the grant and aid program and VTrans. So it's a little, they're all over the place, but it all tracks.
Well, we'll have our joint fiscal folk help us navigate that. But if you say it all tracks and all should add up.
I hope, if I did my job.
All
Should
right. All right. Well, we're pretty sure you probably did, Emily. Then we can go on to the next slide, I guess, the green water, a green river, green water. Oh,
Yes.
okay, Green River.
Green River Reservoir, as I assume you're well aware, the Green River Reservoir is both a state park, but it is also a hydroelectric facility that's operated by Morrisville Water and Light. And the centerpiece of both of those is an aging high hazard dam that's near the end of its original design life. As Morrisville Water and Light contemplates how to proceed with relicensing or decommissioning of the facility, the state is being asked to consider assuming ownership. And currently there's a gap in the information needed to understand the full cost picture. This includes the sort of the major capital needs of this facility along with ongoing annual costs. And so included in the BAA is a $350,000 request to provide an analysis of these capital and annual costs associated with were the state to assume ownership of the Green River Dam. This includes staffing for that facility, insurance, inspections, as well as a true cost benefit analysis based on the current condition of the asset. And the proceedings around this are with FERC at this point and are moving along. And part of the reason for including this request in the BAA is just recognizing there's significant public interest in ensuring the long-term viability of the dam and the reservoir, less so I think about the hydroelectric facility. And our ability to answer these questions is sort of critical to being able to contemplate any opportunities that may or may not exist around federal funding to help with the work.
Okay, I think Senator Westman is obviously very familiar. Is this similar to, I remember on Lake Fairleigh, there was a dam, a failing dam, and actually the towns, it wasn't owned by a public utility, it was owned by I believe three municipalities, and they ended up bonding because if the dam failed, the lake would level would substantially lower, and the value of the camps and the property around the lake would have diminished dramatically. Is this, and you talked about the Green River campground. This ties into the policy question about the public interest for the state of Vermont to acquire ownership. And the answer to that, if the answer to that is it is desirable, then this is what we would need to understand better. So inherent in this proposal, is there assumption that it is in the public interest to acquire the ownership?
No, I mean, I think it's a recognition that there is public interest to acquire the ownership. And, you know, there's a fiduciary obligation to look at the condition of the facility and make sure we're going into it eyes wide open in terms of the cost for any capital improvements, as well as the ongoing operation and maintenance, and have that sort of full-throated conversation about what the cost of assuming ownership would entail.
Is there private property around the reservoir?
Very limited. I believe there are only 2 maybe parcels of private property that touch the reservoir. Senator Westman may have a
yeah. There's the state has 5,500 acres, a little over 5,500 acres there. It's basically everything but a very small piece of land. There's almost 19 miles of shoreline on Green River Reservoir that the state owns.
Okay. So it's a public asset in the sense of
well, there are 27 campsites, remote campsites there, and the state park is very heavily used.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So it seems like from the community perspective, and also from a recreational perspective in terms of part of our statewide recreational inventory. This Green River State Park is a really big piece of that, if you're talking about the use.
And what I would say is FERC has the requirement that a dam safety study be done. And it's on the docket to be worked on this spring and early summer, and they expect an answer. And this is, there are a lot of communities below this dam, given the use of all of this. So it's for the state park, but it's also a recognition that there are questions. Not presently is there any safety problems with the dam that anyone would know of, but going into the future, how safe is the dam going into the future?
All right, questions? I can't, is that the last slide or?
It is. I can stop
Okay.
sharing my screen.
All right. So committee, any questions or around the Green River Reservoir? If the dam went out, there's no body of, there's no lake, there's no reservoir, there's no shoreline. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
So is it true is it not a risk right now? Has that been evaluated? Is that what you said, Rich? I didn't quite understand that. Is there a risk now?
Given no, well, as this is my understanding, and the secretary would probably be better to answer it. My understanding, we know of no risk at this time, but given what the uses will be in the future, going out 10, 20, 30 years, the evaluation will assess what the safety of the dam is going out into the future.
So it's being financially prudent of knowing what the state would be taking on if it assumed ownership is really what is the thinking behind this. Okay. All right. Other questions or clarifications? All right. I think that's it then. Anything we haven't touched or should be asking you that you don't want us to ask, Secretary?
That's a great question. No.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Then
you for
we'll
your
let you
time.
get back to your other work. I'm sure there's plenty to be done. And thank you very much for your testimony and the material that you provided to us.
You're welcome. Be well, everyone. Thank you.
So committee, Chrissy, we have finished our scheduled testimony.
That's correct.